Okay, so I was going to start with just like I say, a quick presentation. Thank you everybody actually for joining at lunch, and thank you for the interest. It's nice to see the interest. Um, so to start with, my presentation is pretty short. The slide deck is short. It's just going to give you kind of like a general overview of kind of some of the areas that you can find the information that you might be looking for, as well as some high-level information about encounters and some of the registration or scheduling design. And then what I'll do is I'll go into a demo of referral triage, internal referral triage, and I chose that one just because that is the more convoluted of the two, and because it's still relatively new, but I'm sure that for the most part people are more familiar with it, having gone through design. But if you're a little bit newer to the process, then it might be helpful to have a refresher. And then we'll go into checking in appointments and any questions that you might have around check-in as well. So just for anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Linda Clark. I'm one of the clinical informatics leads for the registration and scheduling informatics team. Ishti Fikete is my colleague, and we sort of split things up. We've tried to sort of split things up where Ishti is more focused on reg and I'm more sketch, but of course there's a lot of overlap, so it's not always possible for us to do that. And we also have two CISs on our team, Sarah Bukoski and Amy Ting. And just to kind of give you an idea of our involvement, we try to get embedded in the design teams when there's design ongoing. It's not always possible, but that is the ideal, that we do get involved in and understand the design and can speak to the clerical workflows for the clinics. And so now that we've done our ambulatory boot camps and workflow reviews are happening and workshops, we're hoping to be involved in those as well. But there's only 4 of us, so we've split up as many clinics as we can, and then there may be some gaps. So of course we really rely on the clinical informatics teams for sure. I started off this presentation with a few helpful links, and I'll just speak about them a little bit. So just so that you're aware of the existence of some of these documents and where they're located. I'm not sure how much people kind of dig into the encounter type definitions, for instance. So the registration team has a great foundational page, and their encounter type definitions are located there on their foundational page. I think I might have it, I may not have it open up actually. So if I just quickly show this to you, it's a lovely reference. And can I just ask if everybody just mute your mics? That'd be great. So yeah, so this is a great reference document. If you're looking for something, you don't know how an encounter is used, for instance, or the rules around it, you can go into this document and find that information. So it's a really nice reference material document. In addition to that, I've got the there's, for each site that we go live at, we create a VGH SWAT clerk readiness ticket. And in that ticket is what they call kind of like the work in progress document. And this is designed to be used for stabilization to hand over to operations so that we can be sure that somebody is monitoring each of the different lists. There are many, many lists, request queues, work queue monitor queues, the message center pools, if it's a clinic that uses requisition manager. So all of this information is in this document. So it lists all of the, for instance, the first tab, request lists, here are all of the clinics, and their, or all of the request queues, I should say, and the core location. And then this would go to operations for them to go, okay, yes, I've got, you know, this person reviewing this list and another person reviews another list, or however they want to break it out. And so if you go through page by page, it lists each of the different applications and, as I say, queues and who might be monitoring them. So this is also, I think, a helpful document to use when you're populating the clinic keys, because it lists pretty much most of the information that you need to know. Message center pools. Pretty much every clinic will have an admin, a clinical, and a provider pool. Some of them may have more than that. You can, and then requisition manager. Only a few clinics are going to be using requisition manager because it needs a separate person, a dedicated resource to be monitoring. Any operations jobs, work lists that they might need to be referring to on a regular basis, and these would be work lists within PM Office. And then the very last tab is also another tab that you would probably find very useful. It lists the appointment to order to request queue mapping. So if I wanted to know what were all of the orders that were routing to a specific request queue for a clinic, I could look up, say, actually, why don't I just go, I'm going to choose cardiac device, ECG, and echo, and I can see them all here. So again, this is probably a helpful tool when populating the clinic key as well. And then I've also included some help pages. So for internal referral with triage, I think it's important to note when you look in the help page, if I just pop on over there, I do have it open. So if you were to just sort or search for internal referral, you would see two options here. And I think it can be a little bit confusing for people because not all sites are using the new accept orders. That was mainly introduced at CNW. Some clinics at PHC and subsequent cycles after CNW adopted those new accept orders, and it was also intended for use at VGH. So you'll see one help topic that says coastal and selected PHC and CNW sites, and Vancouver and selected PHC and CNW sites. And even though we know VGH is part of Vancouver Coastal, the naming of them was intentional to denote that coastal, means our LGH, SGH, C-Shelt, and then Vancouver, we can easily see that that's VGH. So if you're looking for a help page in terms of internal referral and potentially external referral as well, I think has two, you're looking for the one that says Vancouver and selected PHC. So I have included the link in this document to the internal referral with triage. For our team, the RegSketch CI Informatics team, we've of course got our own adoption materials page, which we will move over to the general informatics page, but it's kind of like our working page. So if you're wondering, oh, where's the document or where's the manual that you use during ambulatory boot camp, you can find it on here on this page. And like I say, we will move it over to the informatics page. I included the scheduling team DCWs. I don't know that anybody ever looks at those. They might not be very meaningful to you, but just so that you're aware. HIM Work Queue Monitor DCW, I go into that quite a bit. I find it very helpful because it lists all of the clinics and their queues. But like I say, you should be able to find that information in the VGH clerk readiness ticket. And then registration during downtime. I don't want to jinx anything, but it is really helpful to know what to do, of course, during a downtime. So I did include the CST help page on registering during a downtime. Any questions about any of those? Okay, so just moving on, registration encounter types. This is a list of the enterprise encounter types. I think maybe the only one that VGH isn't using in this first wave might be residential. But for the most part, they're using all of these encounter types. VGH does follow the enterprise encounter strategy. So there isn't necessarily a separate encounter strategy document for VGH. A summary of encounter management. I wasn't going to go through all of this, and I will forward this slide deck to the invitee list. But just at a, just to kind of quickly mention that, lab is using their lab recurring, medical imaging. We don't really get involved too much with medical imaging, but I wanted to include, the information here too. What else? I think it's important to know that recurring encounters need to be manually discharged at the end of treatment, and that they need to be connected or linked to an appointment. It's kind of deviates from design to have a recurring encounter on its own. It must be linked to an appointment. And also to note that one outpatient encounter can be linked to multiple appointments. Some recommendations. I think one encounter type that does get used quite a bit is the phone message encounter type. I think we saw at CNW that it was used quite a bit after go live because we had patients that had come in maybe the week before and didn't have an upcoming appointment, so they weren't included in cutover. But the provider still wanted to document on that patient, or there were lab results coming in for that patient, and then subsequently the provider might be placing an order. So in some cases, the clerks were creating phone message encounters just to make sure that they had something to link the documents to until the provider was able to place an order. Phone calls with patients that are billable and are scheduled. They're using the phone consult encounter. So the appointment type may be just basic. It may be the standard appointment for the clinic, but the encounter, they just need to know, instead of using a pre-outpatient or an outpatient encounter, they will be flipping the pre-out to a phone consult encounter. Virtual encounters or virtual visits use a virtual health encounter. It used to be called telehealth, now it's virtual health. For any case conferences, whether the patient is there or not, they're using provider to provider encounter. And then clinical trials or research, actually probably should change this to research, won't have, there's not a separate research encounter type appointment or encounter. They'll be using the enterprise encounter strategy. Something also to note is at every site we determine an after hours registration policy and workflow, and so there I've just included the EDD for VGH after hours registration. So it's been determined and agreed upon that the patient placement clerks, and so they're clerks within that fall under HIM health records. For the most part, patient placement will be monitoring a message center pool 24/7. And providers can choose how they want to request the encounter creation. So there is a form that they can fill out. So they can fill out the form, follow it up with a phone call if it's urgent, or just use the form if it's not urgent, use a phone call, whatever is their preferred method of communication. And then facility transfers, I just included the help topic for facility transfers for folks here. Some sort of things to note for scheduling, and you're probably all very familiar with this, but we often see the org window, which is different, or the display of the clinics is different than when you're scheduling. So this is another thing that it's a small thing, but it does trip people up when they're initially going live and creating appointments. They see this org window and they're used to putting in the short display, facility display name. So for instance, Rapid Access Gynae is one that I'm more familiar with. VGH Rapid Access Gynae. The actual display name is VGH RA Gynae. So if I were to type in, RA Gynae, I wouldn't come up with anything. So it's just important to notice that that for the org window, we put in the facility description. And it's also important to note that each clinic is built as its own facility, but there are always a few exceptions where clinics are built under the main hospital facility. And so when you're searching for them in this org window, you'd actually be choosing the main facility. So VGH V, I think it's VGH Vancouver, is what would come up. And then within the encounter, you'd need to drill down and select your clinic from the list of options. Clinics are getting automated appointment reminders at VGH. So I'll speak to this one in 2 secs. I probably should have had these in different order, but this is a list of clinics that are going live with appointment reminders. I think it's almost all of them. There might be a few exceptions. And this number here denotes what their grouping value is, and their grouping value is how many days in advance will their patients be getting appointment reminders. So I think for the most part, most of them are in group 3. Oh no, it's quite a variety. So maybe group 2. Yeah, group 2, 3 days in advance. And then for the group 5, they'll be getting a reminder 14 days in advance, and then again 3 days in advance. So some things to note with appointment reminders: they're only delivered Monday to Friday from 9 to 3 for all clinics. And so another important thing to note too is that if an appointment is rescheduled or scheduled for a date that falls outside of the appointment notification time frame, then a new appointment reminder is not going to be sent. So that's just something to keep in mind if people say, oh, my patient says they didn't receive a reminder. Well, it could be that, the appointment was booked past one of these cutoff dates. The other thing too is that, and you would have noticed this if, being involved in design, the visit modality field is mandatory. So, and it's important to fill that out because that determines as well what preps or instructions to the patients are included in the reminder. So if it's an in-person visit, it's tailored to say, maybe it says, please arrive 15 minutes beforehand, parking is challenging, that sort of thing, and we're located here. Whereas if it's a phone visit, it might say something, your provider will call you, please pay attention to your phone, that sort of thing. And then it is, while they're booking the appointment, these two fields are not mandatory they're not marked as required, however they are mandatory. So it's important that they fill these out, if they do want reminders, to remember to ask the patient, do you want a reminder for this appointment, and what is your preferred method of contact. And then finally, before I launch into internal referral triage, I just included sort of the high level, and this will be familiar to folks because it's included in the clinic keys as well. So just a very high level overview of the process. So before I launch into the internal referral triage demo, any questions about that? Okay, I am going to move this over to a different screen. All right, so I am going to start in the scheduling application, and I'm using the BMT Doctors Clinic as an example. So I've already placed a referral order for my patient. I've got my request queue open. I'm using my request list by location. The request queue is AmBMT future requests. Location type will always be ambulatory for the most part. Location is VGH BMT doctor. So that's the display name of the location, the core location. So I'm just going to scroll down because I know that my patient is probably on the bottom of the list, and here she is. So I've received a new patient referral. So instead of actioning this by booking it right away or moving it to a triage list or a wait list, I am going to create a referral encounter. That's the first thing that I'm going to do. And I'm going to highlight my patient and then go up to the person management, the head icon at the top there, and that's going to allow me to add a new encounter. And I'm going to create a referral encounter, so I want the referral management conversation. And here's where I'm going to type in the entire name. And this is one of the clinics that I know is under the facility. So I'm going to choose Vancouver General Hospital. It's going to launch a search to the EMPI. Oh, this is one of my test patients that I play around with quite a bit. So all of my patient info is here. If I'm not sure if people have a lot of questions about registration. I hadn't planned to go into a lot of detail, but when I do the check-in, if people have questions around the registration tabs, I can go into a little bit more detail regarding that. But for this one, I'm just going to select my medical service. So I'm going to choose medical oncology for this one. And my VGH BMT doctor is my clinic. Now the referring provider does not default, so I need to enter that. Oh. At this point, I don't know who the attending is going to be, and I'm going to fill in the referral information as well. So I'm just going to say that I received the referral today. And the referral status I'm going to mark as ready for triage. Okay, and I'll complete that. Okay, and so now the last thing that I do is, actually if I go up, I can see that the that new encounter has been created. But I'm going to delete this. Well, I'm going to cancel it actually from the request queue because I know that the triaging provider is going to replace the order with a new accept order. So I'm just going to go in and cancel the request. And we have a new cancellation reason, which is order replaced due to triage. And I'll say OK. So it's really important that they do the referral encounter first and then cancel from the list, because as you can see, it drops from the list. However, if somebody canceled in error, they can always find the canceled request. The only thing with this is that it's not broken down by location. So if there's another site that uses a similar queue, it's going to show everybody's list. But for BMT, I think this might be specific to VGH in this case anyway. So I can see the canceled appointments for my patient, or the canceled requests. I just wanted to show you that, just so that you could be aware that if somebody lets you know that they've canceled something in error, they can bring it back. Well, they can find it. The only thing with that is that they can find it, but once a request has been canceled, it needs the provider to replace the order in most instances. There are some ways, it's a bit of a convoluted process for the clerk to replace that order. And I have to double check and make sure if we have troubleshooting materials regarding that, actually. Follow up on that. So, okay, so now I'm going to go in. I'm just going to go in and place an order for this patient. I just want to make sure it's the right patient. Yeah. I do want to make sure that I've got the right encounter. So I'm going to change my encounter here. Yeah, BMT doctor. So I'm going in as a triaging provider now, and I'm just going to place an accept order. And I've decided I want this patient to be seen pretty soon. And the reason I'm showing you this is that with the new accept orders, it's kind of nice that the referring provider may not know that there are several different appointments possible. And so when the triaging provider is completing triage, they can just select the specific encounter, whereas the referring provider, the way that the referral to orders are linked to the appointment, we're not able to do this quite in the same way. I'm just going to keep this one simple and do a BMT new patient. My reason for visit, and in this case I am going to be nice as the provider, and I'm going to say, yeah, I do want to see this patient in person. So the clerk will know to visit or to book an in-person visit. I'll go ahead and sign that. And then I'm going to go back to scheduling and refresh my page, and my patient is showing there at the bottom. So at that point, once I see my accept referral order, I can go ahead and either book them, or I can move them to a wait list, whatever is my general process. I'm just going to go ahead and book this one. I'm going to complete the request. The other piece here to note as well, which is nice, is the future requests and future appointments. So you can see any future requests that the patient has if you need to coordinate with any other clinics, or even coordinate within your clinic, your own unit. My patient is pretty busy, so I probably have a lot of appointments. Yeah, and the referring provider does not transfer over because this is the information from the order itself. So this is another step that the clerk kind of has to be aware of. And I'll go back just a bit here. If I were to look at, I'm just thinking about the simplest way to find the referring provider. They won't show up, as I say, on the order because we're just seeing the ordering provider who is the triaging provider. That's not the original referring. So what I would need to do is look up in my person management. I can see my referral encounter and do a quick preview, and I can see my referring here. It's not the best, it's a bit clunky, but at least it keeps the clerk within the scheduling application so that they can see that information. No to interpreter required, visit modality. I don't know at this point if the patient wants a reminder. I'm going to, let's pretend actually that I'm on the phone with them and we'll just say yes. And that I'm going to put in their cell phone number. And say okay. And now I'm going to book my patient. So I want to book them for today. I'm just going to book them with Dr. Hay again, just to keep it simple for my view. And I can see that the patient is scheduled. So I'm going to confirm that. Say okay. And now this patient is very busy, as you can see. I have a lot of encounters. So here's where I'm going to select my referral encounter. And so I want to, in fact, my patient has had an appointment here before. So I just want to make sure that I'm choosing the right referral encounter. And there's one last step, and that's that I need to change that referral encounter to pre-admit, because you can see if I hover over the appointment, you can see that the encounter is referral. It's the second line from the bottom there. So the last thing I need to do is right-click, and I'm going to go in and change the, modify the encounter. So I go up to person, modify encounter, and I get my encounter selection. This time I'm choosing pre-register outpatient. And here, now I do know my attending provider. So I am going to, after I've selected my pre-outpatient encounter type, even though the attending provider field isn't mandatory, I'm going to type in Dr. Hay's name. Kevin. I'll bounce over to a couple of the other fields just to, I can see the MS eligibility, MSP eligibility should come back as well because we're linked up with the EMPI, so they would be able to see whether the patient qualifies for MSP. And I know that their own guarantor, their health plan is all filled in. So I'm going to complete this. So we've got now if I, oops, sorry, if I refresh, yeah, it should show, now you can see that it shows pre-outpatient. So that's internal referral triage. Any questions from that? Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and check in. And so I was asked to speak a little bit about the check-in process and just some things to note. Check-in in Cerner scheduling and registration does take a little bit longer. I'm not sure how long it takes in PCIS, but this is one of the areas where the check-in clerks, you know, it is quite hectic. And ideally, the patients are coming in with their ID, so the clerk needs to be reviewing their ID as they're checking them in and indicating what type of ID that they have received. So there's a few things, of course, that they're doing with check-in. I'm just going to go through and functionally just check in my patient here. So I'm just going to go to actions, check in. Oh, I should notice too. So when my schedule is really free and open like this, it's very easy to see all the appointments. So some clerks prefer to use the scheduling grid when they're checking in patients. They like that color-coded visual. And others, we usually recommend, you know, maybe it's simpler for them to use the appointment check-in by location queue, just because they might have a busy clinic. It may be, you know, the grid looks overfull. They have a lot of providers. As you can see with this clinic, there's a lot of providers. I'm not sure if each provider is holding clinic every single day, but once this schedule gets booked up, it can get hard to find patients. So it is kind of a nicer way to view things by looking at a list. Boop. And, you know, that way I can see all of the appointments in date, time, order. I can see my patient, you know, and once I've checked them in, they drop off the list. So why don't I go ahead and check in Linda BMT at 8 o'clock. And so again, it's just a right-click check-in. Opens up the check-in window. In some clinics, they have a tracking location. And you'll see the list of tracking locations. They should start with the facility. And that's very specific to their workflow. My understanding, though, is that there was a change not too long ago where you don't necessarily have to select the tracking location for the patient to automatically show up on the tracking board. Oh, I see that there's a message. That's correct. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That's another way of doing it, is to search by patient. So it just depends. It just kind of comes down to preference. If you know, if you want to search by the patient to see all of their appointments, searching by the patients is a nice way to do that too, because you can see all of the appointments for the day. And if there's any kind of coordination that had to have happened, maybe things are running late, you can phone the subsequent clinic and say, hey, you know, Mrs. Smith is going to be 15 minutes late to her appointment. That is a nice way to search as well for check-in. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, okay. As usual, my conversations window comes up. I'm going to choose the outpatient, register to an outpatient. So all of my information is filled in. The clerk should be verifying all of this information at check-in and by using non-leading questions, and as in, you know, can you tell me what your address is and your phone number? And often they'll say, any changes to your address or phone number, and can you let me know where you're at? As opposed to saying, are you still at, you know, 3333 Vancouver Street? Encounter information, fill that in. Again, the nice thing is that you can see what the previous encounter type was. This is super helpful if you're using, you know, like especially recurring, if it came from a pre-recurring to a recurring, so that you're switching it from like to like. You're not switching a pre-recurring to an outpatient, for instance. So I'm going to move this to outpatient, and my source of ID will just say that my patient has shown me both their care card and some photo ID. My primary care provider, I'm going to validate that with the clerk or with the patient. In this case, I'm keeping it easy, and it'll be my referring as well. And I'll say that yes, I did verify the primary care provider. Insurance, I'm just going to say that they are an insured resident. Again, just wanting to point out the MSP eligibility. This is a really nice thing, and it's of course discussed in training, and they talk at length, I think, about the EMPI in registration training as well, just so that people are aware that, you know, you don't have to look up your patients in HealthNet anymore. You can look in, it comes, the MSP eligibility comes through. Accident-related visit, I'll just say no. Again, my guarantor, that's all the same, but I do need to confirm the health plan. So I'll click on this. And that is it for that. If there are any additional contacts that the patient wants the clinic to be aware of, you can capture that information here as well. And I'll just complete that. Oh, right. So, yeah, and so this does get asked if the patient identifies as First Nations, Métis, or Inuit, and I think that there should be, the HIM RSDQ team generally has an information bulletin and posters, and they would go up to kind of educate people as to why this question is being asked. It's mainly asked if, in case the patient would like to make any uses of First Nations, Indigenous support. So I'm just going to say non-Indigenous in this case, and I'm just going to say complete. And if I wanted to print any documents, I could at this point, but I'm not going to, so I'll just say okay. And then if I go back to my other screen, I can see that the color has changed to this bright green, and so I know that they're checked in. So that's the end of the check-in, and that's pretty much all I had planned to show, but I don't know if there's anything else anybody would like me to share with you. No questions about the registration piece? All right, so I'll make sure that the slide deck is forwarded. Hopefully people find that useful. I think the work in progress, like I say, document would be very helpful to people. But yeah, that concludes the knowledge share. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Linda.
you.
Thank you.